So, with a new book and a new focus for the next little while, we have a new memory verse. Anyone have that prepared? Nancy?
I don't have it memorized, so to speak, but it'll get there. And that's Joshua 1:9. It's like, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. So normally I would say who can give us a recap of last time, but that doesn't really apply in this case. So let's get right into the reading. I've also completely lost track of where in the world we might have been with the reading snake. So we're just going to start up at the front left. Mark, can you read for us Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9?
Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore rise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, into the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, as I have given you, as I said unto Moses, in the wilderness and this Lebanon, even to the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before me all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so will I be with thee, and I will not fail thee or forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shalt thou divide their inheritance the land, which I swear to their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong, very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of my mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest.
Thank you. Question number 1. Who was the father of Joshua?
None.
None. Okay. And how did Joshua, that is, come to be Israel's leader? Carrie?
Moses passed away, and so, but before he passed away, he laid his hand on Joshua, pretty much bestowing, and then God's Spirit came upon Joshua.
Okay, exactly. So, and at whose direction had he done that?
Moses? Like Moses?
Yeah, at whose direction had Moses done that?
God.
At God's direction, exactly right. So, why would Israel be willing to accept the leadership of this guy? I mean, yes, as Carrie said, Moses has specifically selected him, but what else, Nancy?
Well, he was with him. I mean, it was like he was a second-hand man in doing everything and being with him. So he was learning, and he knew what Moses had done, and people were seeing that. I mean, if they didn't, it would be kind of hard not to.
That's right. So they are not completely unfamiliar with this guy, Joshua. He has been Moses' assistant. That is the way that he's labeled here in verse 1. And on top of that, he's even had leadership roles throughout the time that they have been wandering. Remember back in, let's see, I'm not sure I remember. I think it would be in Exodus chapter 17, maybe 18, where the Amalek, they have just gotten out of Egypt and the Amalekites attack. Well, remember, he sends Joshua to lead the army. Moses and Aaron and Hur, the old guys, stand back and observe the fighting, but Joshua is actually leading the charge. Misty, your hand was up?
I was going to say, kind of like Nancy alluded to, he's been there at the front. He was also one of the spies that went over and came back with a good report, one of two. So, I mean, he's sort of been preparing for this role for a while. So it'd make a lot of sense for him to have been kind of in later years, Moses as a successor to the people.
That's right. Harley, your hand also went up?
I was gonna say he was like an apprentice.
Yeah, kind of,
Like,
that position with Moses. And then finally Mallory.
I was gonna say, wouldn't he be like one of the oldest people right now?
He would. Well, he would be one of the oldest
Living
outside the tribe of Levi, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he and Caleb would be the only remaining of that generation. Again, excepting the Levites because reasons that we've talked about in the past. So that also, well, sometimes that helps, other times it hurts. But in this case, it seems to be helping. All right. On top of all of that, it's not as if the Israelites didn't know this day was going to come. In fact, just a very, very short time before this, if you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 18, Deuteronomy chapter 18, and I'm going to read verses 15 through 19. Moses is speaking to the people as they're preparing to cross the Jordan and go into the promised land, but of course Moses isn't going to be with them. And he says, verse 15, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. It is to him you shall listen, just as you desired of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, 'Let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, or see this great fire any more, lest I die.' And the Lord said to me, 'They are right in what they have spoken. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not listen to my words that he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him.'" Okay, so when Moses says that, he's not only talking about this, of course, he's got much more important things in mind as well, but he's also talking about the fact that after Moses is gone, God is not going to leave them without a prophet. He's going to give them somebody to lead. Now, at the same time, and I think I know where you're going, Mark, but I'm going to preempt you just for a moment, and then we'll get back to you in a second. In chapter 34, in recounting, in closing out this book, right after recounting the death of Moses, we read Deuteronomy chapter 34, beginning of verse 9. "And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him." This is what Carrie was talking about. "So the people of Israel obeyed him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. And there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. None like him, for all the signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh, and to all his servants, and to all his land, and for all the mighty power and all the great deeds of terror that Moses did in the sight of all Israel." So he's made this promise that he's not going to leave them without a prophet, that he is going to provide them with somebody to lead, with somebody to speak on God's behalf, and he says it's going to be a prophet like me. And yet, even right here at the end of Deuteronomy, it's saying there hasn't really arisen a prophet like Moses. Is that where you're going, Mark?
Well, I was just gonna kind of piggyback off of what Mallory said.
Okay, go ahead.
The children of Israel wandered for 40 years. They had a long time to talk among themselves about everything that happened, and to slowly, over the course of 40 years, watch as two people just stood the test of time, withstood the purge, because that's what it was. It was a purge. And I think, I don't think it was a difficult task for them to get behind Joshua.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case. What we see throughout the rest, certainly of chapter 1 of Joshua, makes it appear that, even though, remember, Moses, he faced a lot of opposition. He faced several times where the Israelites rebelled against him. They just said, "All right, that's it. We've had it. We're not following your leadership anymore. You never do anything good for us. You always lead us into these terrible situations." Even Aaron and Miriam were part of this sort of nonsense. We don't really see anything like that with Joshua, and I think Mark's exactly right. That generation saw all his works in the wilderness. They were much more willing to heed the instructions from their leader, from Joshua, and to trust that he knew what he was doing and that he was giving them the commandments of God. Okay, but of course Joshua. Anyone know what the name Joshua turns into if you pass it through a bunch of languages and eventually? So if you pass it through Greek and Latin before you get it into English, Nancy?
Jesus.
It's Jesus. Okay, so isn't it interesting? God picked that same name for his son, who actually is the prophet like Moses. So Joshua kind of fulfills that role. He fulfills that role for fleshly purposes. But it's going to come in another Joshua later on, Jesus, the Son of God, who's going to be the real prophet like Moses, the final one that sort of legitimizes the rest. Okay, number 2. What was the name of the great river? That is the Euphrates. And what were to be their other their other borders or boundaries of their land once they took it?
As far as the Great Sea, so that's the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah, so the Great Sea on the west, he mentions this wilderness, the wilderness and this Lebanon, so that gives you sort of roughly the boundaries that we're talking about. It's not meant to completely encircle that territory, but it's a pretty broad range of land, isn't it? And what were Joshua and Israel to remember and observe? Mark? The law that had been given by Moses. Number 3, what would result from the Israelites doing according to all that is written in the law of God? Nancy?
They would prosper.
They would prosper, they would have success, God would be with them. But would they faithfully keep God's law? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I mean, that's over time, the answer is no.
That's right. So yeah, there are going to be periods, like we've just said with Joshua. They've learned a lesson. They do a great job of following Joshua's leadership, but they still make plenty of mistakes. It's right here in this book. Just, what is it in chapter? It's before chapter 7. I guess it would be in chapter 6 that it happens, although it's not narrated there. But in chapters 7 and 8, they're already being defeated because, as a nation, they're not keeping the commandments.
The lesson is always before us, and it's timeless. And that is, if we fail to teach the young, then we're a generation away from the truth just being told.
And it's not so. And this is one of those strange situations where it seems like this generation actually did a better job than their fathers. But of course, that's not going to continue. I'm kind of jumping ahead. I've got this fresh in my mind because I've been preparing the next quarter's material. But at the beginning of the book of Judges, you remember how the people's relationship with God, for lack of a better way of describing it, is termed there. Is that the Israelites kept the law as long as that generation was around. And then their children arose, and exactly like Mark said, they didn't teach their children very well, and their children were terrible. Their children completely rejected God, completely rejected His law, and that's when suddenly the Philistines and the Midianites and I think it's the Syrians a couple of times, and the Ammonites and everybody, all of the nations that surround them, especially some ones that they failed to drive out as they were supposed to do, end up causing them problems because that next generation, and even to an extent this generation, is going to fail to perfectly keep God's law. Now, as I say very often, it's easy for us to nitpick as we sit here in our nice padded chairs with a roof over our heads sheltering us from the elements and all. If we were in their position, if we were in the same situation, if we were part of this generation that went in to conquer the land under Joshua, would we have done better?
Probably not.
We would not have. We would not have. Now, it kind of gets to like, well, what are we going to do? We're going to tally up the number of sins that they committed and then tally up the number of sins that we would have committed and see which one is worse. Doesn't matter. They're both equally bad. They're both rejecting God's laws. And we would have done the same. Might not have been in exactly the same ways. Might not have been as bad necessarily, but it would have amounted to the same problem. Nancy?
But that does happen nowadays. That is continuing to happen.
That's right, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. So we, in our own day, we have the same mandate, essentially, that's expected of us, and yet we also have failed. So what would be the expected outcome in principle for the Israelites, given that they're going to reject at least some of God's commandments and fail to faithfully keep everything that He has commanded? Tim?
Well, that they would turn back to God when they did fail.
Say it again?
That they would turn back to God when they did fail. So instead of just continually going off and...
But if they didn't, So don't think that far ahead. Just the fact that they're going to fail, Mallory.
They're going to lose all these promises.
So the promises are not going to be delivered to them because the promises were attached to the condition. I'll give you these things if you will faithfully keep all that I have commanded you. And they're not going to do it. Let's think back to us. The same thing is expected of us. Faithfully keep all that God has commanded. And yet we haven't done it. So in principle, what would be expected in our case?
Not make it to heaven.
We don't deserve the reward, do we? So we have the expectation of judgment instead. What kept this from happening for the Israelites? Because he did still give them the land. Why did he keep this promise? Even when they didn't hold up their end of the bargain. Mark?
Well, he's just demonstrating that when he says he will do something, he will do it. Sometimes he set conditions, and he did it with the children of Israel. And there is a point that's a bridge too far, and things change, and in a really bad way in their case.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it's go ahead, Mallory.
No, I was gonna say, it's no different than, at least in our house, you give the kids a promise or a condition, and you notice that they like have forgotten, like they're supposed to clean the room, and you just sit there waiting, prolonging when this judgment's gonna come in, to hopefully like just kind of being there that they will remember, oh, this is what I'm supposed to go back to do. God's patience doesn't trump or negate the promises and the conditions on it. It's just he's wanting you to like correct yourself, self-correct, versus him having to come in and do it.
So it comes down to patience, mercy, and grace, and hoping for what Tim was saying earlier, that, as Mallory said, that they would self-correct, that they would repent, that they would turn back to him, that they would learn from the sort of minor consequences that he does give them. I mean, it seems pretty major to them, but in the grand scheme of things, it's fairly minor. That they would learn from those things and correct their behavior and turn back to him. Mark, was your hand going up again?
No.
So, obviously, this translates over to our situation in the New Testament. It's not exactly the same, but it prefigures what is going on in this new covenant. We don't deserve the promises. We don't deserve the promised rest any more than they did. But God is patient with us. He shows us mercy. He shows us grace. Now, as Mark said earlier, there's a point. There's a bridge too far. And he says, all right, I've had it. It's enough. He's not required to give us. We're not earning it. But he does still expect us to be faithful to him. And he expects us to repent and turn back to him when we have not. Mark?
And let's not forget the promises he made to Abraham. He promised Abraham those three things. And he fulfilled those three things. Now, granted, the children of Israel, I don't know, were they any less deserving than anybody else could have been in those circumstances?
That's
probably
right.
not.
Exactly right. We're all in the same boat. This is getting into what Paul is proving at length in the first few chapters of Romans, that all have sinned, that all fall short of God's glory, that all deserve the wrath of God. The Jews, because they transgressed the law. The Gentiles, because they knew most of the works of the law, which were written on their hearts, and they also transgressed God's expectations, even though he hadn't given them as clear a set as the Jews. Okay. Let's keep reading. Janet, can you take verses, we're going to skip forward a little bit. Can you take verses 12 through 18, please?
And the Reubenites and the Gadites and half the tribe of Manasseh, Joshua spoke, saying, remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is giving you rest and is giving you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side of the Jordan. But you shall pass before your brethren armed, all your mighty men of valor, and help them, until the Lord has given your brethren rest as he gave you, and they also have taken possession of the land which the Lord your God has given them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession and enjoy it, which Moses the Lord's servant gave you on this side of the Jordan toward the sunrise. So they answered Joshua, saying, all that you command us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we heeded Moses in all things, so we will heed you. Only the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your command and does not heed your words, and all that you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and of good courage.
Thank you. Number 4, what tribes have been given permission by God to stay on the east of the Jordan? Tim?
Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh.
At least half of
Half
Manasseh,
of
yes.
Manasseh.
So, why didn't they get an inheritance on the west side of the Jordan with the other tribes? Carrie?
It's not that they didn't get it, they liked the land as they were on that side of the Jordan and asked if they could stay over here.
Yeah, they specifically requested it. It's not that they are being left out. They've taken themselves out of the pool and said, we kind of like it here. This is a really nice land. We would just as soon settle here if that's okay, and they were given that permission.
So was it half of the tribe of the half-tribe Manasseh?
It's confusing. So it's not always clear whether the half tribe of Manasseh refers to the half tribe as in, it's from Joseph, So Ephraim is a half and then Manasseh's half. In this case, it's half of Manasseh.
Right,
Because
but
Manasseh
my
was
version,
also.
the New American Standard says, and to the half-tribe of
Yeah.
Manasseh, which reads differently than what she read, which is half of the tribe, so.
Yeah, and I think
Like a fourth of.
it amounts to the same thing in this case. Because Manasseh is also going to get some inheritance, the other half of Manasseh is going to get an inheritance on the west side. Okay, where am I? Okay, so what was expected of the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half of Manasseh, even though they had taken their inheritance, or in lieu of their inheritance, they had taken part of the east side. Nancy?
They would fight with all the tribes to take over, to destroy all the different.
Okay, so lest anybody think that they're getting out of, that they're saying, we don't really want to go into that. We didn't want to go into the land 40 years ago. We don't want to do it now. We're totally content to stay right here. And that's not the case. They're saying, this land is really good. We're happy to come over and help you guys conquer. And that's what God and what Moses expected them to do and demanded that they do. And they were happy to do it. Number 5, who would stay in the land Moses gave them beyond the Jordan while the fighting men invaded Canaan?
The wives, children, and their livestock.
Okay, so the ones who aren't fighting, the ones who aren't going to really add anything to the military pursuit, they're going to stay there and
On
continue.
the east side of the Jordan.
On the
correct?
east side, yes.
Okay, see, beyond just,
It's confusing.
it is
So
confusing.
beyond the Jordan, anytime you read that in this book, it's from the perspective of living in the promised land already. It's like, this is our land. So beyond the Jordan means the east side. It's kind of,
Okay.
it's weird.
Toward the sunrise is what it says.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Okay. So how did the people feel about this upcoming monumental task? Mallory?
They feel like they're gonna do it.
Feeling pretty good. They've got a whole lot more courage this time around than they did when the 12 spies came back, don't they? This is looking pretty good. Okay. Number 6. What was to be done with anyone who rebelled against Joshua's command?
To be put to death,
Be put to death. According to whom?
according to
God. Well,
Are you talking about who was saying that?
Who was saying that in this passage?
The Reubenites, the Gadites, and then the half tribe of Manasseh.
That's right. It appears now might be so Joshua back in where is it? In verse 10, Joshua commanded the officers of the people. So it might be the whole, that whole group, but it reads like Denise is suggesting, like it's coming actually from the representatives from Reuben and Gad and Manasseh. So these officers, these fighting men that are prepared to go over, they're like, we're not going to get anything out of this. We're just fulfilling our responsibility and keeping our promise. We're ready to go over there and tear this place apart in order to conquer it for our brothers, the rest of this nation. And furthermore, they're saying, and if anybody gives you any trouble, Joshua, we're with you. We're not going to let it happen. We are going to make sure that things stay orderly, that the people will submit to your commands. This is sounding great, isn't it?
Just to confirm in my mind, Well, he's saying, this is being said to Gad, Reuben, and to the entire tribe of Manasseh, who all the half tribe is going to go fight, but half are going to stay there and half are going to go back, right? But he's saying this to
Something
the
like
whole
that.
tribe,
Yeah.
to the whole tribe of Manasseh, right?
So he's talking to representatives of the half of the tribe of Manasseh that's going to stay, as well as the representatives of the half that's going to
So he's
go
talking
into
to
the
them
land.
all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, you've got I don't know, 72 elders or something like that all gathered together, and this group over here are the ones who are going to stay over on the east side, on the east side of the Jordan. So he's kind of singling them out, but their brothers from the same tribe of Manasseh are also there with the
And
larger
that's
group.
already been determined who is who at that point?
Sorry?
It's
I think
determined
they already knew. They
Who's
already
the
knew.
east and who's the west siders and who's the...
They already had that figured out because back in Numbers, I forget exactly what chapters, but I think it's in the low 30s there. I guess it would have to be the low 30s, there aren't high 30s. They had already determined that, Reuben and Gad and part of Manasseh seems like it was already pretty much
So they've
figured out
already
by that.
predetermined who's who.
Yeah. Okay. Number. Nope, changed my mind. Let's keep reading. Tim, can you take the first 7 verses of chapter 2?
And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men as spies secretly to Shittim, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." So they went and came to the house of a harlot whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. It was told the king of Jericho, saying, "Behold, men from the sons of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." And the king of Jericho sent word to Rahab, saying, "Bring out the men that have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out the land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them, and she said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. It came about when it was time to shut the gate at dark that the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them in the stalks of the flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. So the men pursued them on the road to the Jordan to the fords, and as soon as those who were pursuing them had gone out, they shut the gate.
Thank you. Number 7. How many spies did Joshua send into the city of Jericho?
2.
He sent 2. And how did they get in undetected?
Probably when I think about fortresses back then, they had the gates that were open and closing to protect, and then the walled city, I say walled city, but Jericho was that way. But they would open it to have commerce come in and out during the day, and then they would close it for protection at night. And more than likely, that's probably how they came in, was with somebody, they slipped in with, somebody coming in to sell something or something like that.
Exactly. There's no reason now. It's possible that the people of Jericho, since they know that there's this giant mass of people that seems kind of imposing, just a little distance over the river. They're not right across the river, but they're pretty close. That they might be a little concerned. They obviously know from what the representatives of the king say that these people are a danger. So it's possible that they sort of had to disguise themselves and slip in and pretend that they're not. But I think it's more than likely they just walked into the city. Their job is to blend in, not to stand out by trying to remain hidden and end up looking suspicious. Jen?
Well, I mean, news of them there traveled quickly.
Yes.
I mean, it wasn't very long until they knew they were there.
So somehow somebody
Yeah.
figured out what's going on. We don't know exactly how long they were there. It says that they lodged with Rahab in her house. That would seem to suggest that they spent at least one night there, or at least that they were gearing up to do so. We don't know for sure any more details than what we've been told here, but one way or another, the news has gotten around. Yes, and can you remind me? I have like 3 options for what I think your name is, and I can't decide which it is.
It's Rochelle.
Rochelle, okay.
First time I just really realized that they went to Rahab. It seems like they went to Rahab first, like as soon as they entered the city. But at this point, how would they have known to go straight to her? other than God guiding them, I guess, but.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I mean, God's providence is definitely involved with this, but I don't know that it's necessarily that they went directly to Rahab's house. I mean, we're told so. They went in and came into the house of a prostitute. His name was Rahab, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they went through the gate and went, okay, that house over there. It's probably they walked around the city, they scoped it out, and they ended up in this house where they figured they could blend in, because where else are they going to go? They can't just go in and like, hi, do you mind if we just kind of waltz in here and take over your living room and sleep here tonight, something like that. It was easier to make that happen going to the house of a prostitute for reasons that I don't particularly want to get into. Nancy.
But her house was in the wall.
That's right.
It was part of the wall, so what better place to be?
And so that also might be part of them trying to scope out the situation and figure out how we're going to get through this here wall. And like, well, there's an opportune situation here. Let's just go in and, ask some questions and see what we can learn. Okay. I think we have covered number 8 and my follow-up to it. Number 9, where did the spies hide while in Jericho? Jen?
On the roof underneath the flax.
Yeah, so she has flax laid out presumably for drying because, we're so used to, in our economy, most of us, or at least a lot of us, having just one line of work, and that's how we make our money, and then that finances everything else because we like to specialize. Throughout the history of the world, that is an exceedingly rare thing, and so most people have several different lines of work, several different means of making money, and this is probably what's going on here, that Rahab, in addition to her profession, let's say, is also using turning flax into linen. Let's put it that way: turning flax into linen, whether to sell or just to make clothes. It's obviously a significant help to them economically. Okay. And why would Rahab hide them? I mean, they hid themselves, but she covers for them. Why would she do that, Nancy?
Because she said that they'd heard everything that had gone on from the time they left Egypt. And she said, and I know your God is with you. So she understood their God.
Yeah. So not only has news of the spies themselves traveled around Jericho, but news, like we were alluding to earlier, of the nation and their pretty clear intentions to come in here and displace all of the inhabitants of this land are well known. And she says, we've heard what happened in Egypt. We've heard what happened when you crossed the Red Sea. Excuse me. We've heard what happened to the Amorites, to Sihon and Og, all of those things, and we're terrified. And so she has decided that she wants to join herself to the winning side. Now, is that the purest motive that we could possibly come up with?
Like self-preservation.
Self-preservation.
Yeah, you don't want to die.
Yeah. So I mean, it's totally reasonable, but it's not as if she is looking at her situation and going, these people are horrible. They're all pagans, and this is the one true God, and that's the one that we really should be worshiping, and that's why I want to join myself to that people. That doesn't seem to really enter into her thoughts. I mean, look at her profession. I mean, there's a lot of sort of explanations that we could offer about that, sort of mitigating circumstances perhaps, but one way or another, that's her profession. This is not a good thing, and yet she's looking at the situation. She can tell that this people's God is very powerful, and she wants to be on his side and not on the side that she's currently on.
Well, she even risks a lot by just telling them that. I mean,
That's right.
if they search the place and they find them up there, she could be in a lot of trouble.
That's right. So she's pretty serious about this. She's willing to risk her own neck, get in a lot of trouble. These are the kind of people who would not really think twice about just executing her pretty much on the spot for an offense like this. I mean, even in our society, we would consider harboring spies deliberately like that to be a treasonous offense, potentially worthy of the death penalty. So, she's taken a pretty big risk. But the reason I want to bring that up is that we look at this fear of judgment, and sometimes we're kind of skeptical of that motivation. It's a perfectly good motivation. The fear of judgment and the desire for self-preservation is a perfectly acceptable reason to join the Lamb's team. Now, we want it to grow to more than that. We want it to grow into love and trust. But if it starts out as just, I don't want that, and this is the one that can protect me, that's good enough. Take refuge in the Son. Mallory.
Meanwhile, she's different than Pharaoh, who went through all this and he never even could consider changing or that there was another possibility. And so it goes to even today, like people can be faced with the facts. You can hear the truth, you can hear the facts, but what is that going to do? Is that going to cause you to believe, or is that going to be like, I'm just going to put blinders up and I don't really, ignore it? And so she decided, because it's not like she's the only one who heard it. They didn't whisper it to her. The whole town of Jericho heard it. And so their solution was, let's kill these spies so that way this stuff will come. And her solution is like, no, let's not anger this God who's going to do all these things.
So some hearts are softened and others are hardened by hearing the message. That's exactly right. How else did she help the spies after having covered for them and allowed them to hide in her house? Nancy?
Well, she told them that, that when they go out, to go into the hills and to hide there for 3 days until they see them come returning. And she says, then it's going to be safe for you to go.
Yeah, so whether this is just her best guess or something that's based on, procedure that she's familiar with or whatever, she seems to know that you guys really shouldn't just go straight back. They're going to find you. Go hide out in the hills for a few days and then go back, and you'll probably make it that way. So she's willing to give them quite a bit of help. I'd like to get through one more reading. Brian, can you take verses 15 through 21 of chapter 2 for us?
Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall. She dwelt on the wall. And she said to them, get to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Afterward, you may go your way. So the men said to her, we will be blameless of the oath of yours with which you have made us swear, unless, when we come into the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down, unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and your father's household to your own house. So it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we will be guiltless. And whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head if a hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we will be free from your oath, which you made us swear. Then she said, according to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord in the window. They departed and went to the mountain and stayed there 3 days, until the pursuers returned. The pursuers sought them all along the way, but did not find them. So the 2 men returned, descended from the mountain, and crossed over, and they came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and told him of all that had befallen them. And they said to Joshua, truly, the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands. For indeed, all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us.
All right, thank you. Number 11, how would the army of Israel know which house to spare when they invaded the city? Janet?
There would be a scarlet cord hanging in the window that she helped them escape from.
Okay, so a clear, contrived sign would demonstrate, and they could spread that information to the army and say, leave that house alone. Okay, otherwise, if she didn't do that, then what was going to happen?
They'd all be killed.
They would all be killed, okay. What if they put out the cord, but they didn't all gather in the house?
They'd be killed.
They'd be killed. What if they put out the cord, they gathered in the house, but then, a couple of them said, well, we're going to go out and kind of look around and see what's going on, and we're going to, go out and meet these Israelites as they come into the city. Then what would have happened?
They'd be killed.
And whoever did that was going to be killed. Okay, so by putting out the cord, and by gathering in the house, and by staying there while the city fell, could we say that Rahab and her father's household were earning their salvation from this judgment? Nancy?
No, they were just she was doing that because they said, if you do this, well, then you'll be helped. She didn't earn anything. She just obeyed.
That's right. It's still a very obvious gift that the Israelites are giving to this family. It is an act of grace, an act of mercy, but it comes with some conditions. Mark?
I was gonna say, it's kind of similar to the ark when you think about it, because, they, did Noah really deserve to be spared? When God saw him, he saw a man worth saving, obviously, because he did, but.
But he had sinned just like all of us.
True, but had had Noah stayed outside the ark, would he have been saved?
Exactly right. So the reason that, go ahead, Mallory.
It's more, to me, it reminds me more of like the Passover, which I think is very fitting with Rahab being part of, Jesus' genealogy and all of these, because it's a scarlet cord, it could have been a cord of any color, but scarlet, the color of blood, all this stuff, and they had to stay in there, which is what they had to do when they left Exodus, which, Joshua's brought up, and that story's been passed on in this Passover, and God had the same, pretty much the same thing. You leave your house, you're gonna die. You stay in the house until it's all clear to go out. And to me, it's very, almost, they didn't have to, sacrifice a lamb for this, but short of all of that, it was very, to me, it reminds me of that. And then you go forward to, Jesus and all of it.
Absolutely right. And there are lots of, I'm sorry, Mark, we really don't have time. There are lots of these sort of sorting events in the Old Testament, and they're all looking forward to the New Testament one. And that's why I wanted to harp on it so much, is that the same thing applies. Of course there are requirements, there are expectations of us. That doesn't mean that we are earning a spot in heaven. We are far past that point. We can't do it. We've already given up our spot. We've already sinned. We've already transgressed. One more question and then we will be done. Number 12, how long did the spies remain in the hill country before returning to Joshua?
3 days.
3 days, according to Rahab's advice. And that's where we will leave it for tonight. Thank you very much. We're going to be in lesson 181 on Sunday. I was going to fake it. That's right.
But you're in my class. Were you? Yeah. Who was your teacher? Miss Kayla? Oh, yes,
Just let me see. 18.
Yeah, it's probably somewhere.
We'll sing 391 before Tim brings us to the station. 391. There's within my heart a melody, Jesus whisper sweet and low. Hear my
as I go, feasting on the riches of His grace, resting beneath the sheltering wing, always looking on His smiling face. That is why I shout and sing. Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go. Soon He's coming back to welcome me, far beyond the starry sky. I shall wing my flight to worlds unknown. I shall reign with Him on high. Jesus, 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 sweetest name I know, fills my every longing, keeps me singing as I go. On Sunday, if you were here, you'll remember Jeremy spoke about trying to find our role in the body. That we talked about the body and everybody being different parts of the body. And he asked, show of hands of who said that, thought to themselves when he asked what role you were, what body part you were, whether you were a big toe or an armpit. And of course, none of us, I'm sure, pretty thought about, well, that's who I am. That's my role. But as he mentioned, the body needs those functions, and just like a congregation, we need everybody doing all the things that have to be done here to make up a functioning congregation. And so I thought I'd piggyback off of that, because one of the things that he talked about was something that I've been thinking about anyway, so I'm just going to continue with that thought. But none of us are more important than each other, and we're all one in Christ Jesus through baptism. We find that in Galatians chapter 3, 27 through 28. But outside in our everyday world, and the world is just the opposite of that, what it is of the body of Christ. I mean, everybody is looking out for themselves. It's dog eat dog, pinch, scratch, fight, whatever you have to do to get ahead. One up each other for the ultimate recognition of our accomplishments. So that's what the world is all about. People are ranked above each other. Many folks are memorialized in various ways based on their contributions to society, or their business achievements, or their successes, or maybe their religious leadership roles and affiliations. Awards and honors are bestowed to many people. Christians are not exempt from that either, but in the business world and the world outside of these walls and what we are as Christians. So, and we shouldn't be like that, but people are glorifying and trying to build each other up in ways outside that we wouldn't do ourselves. There's a lot of people that have their names affixed to educational buildings, different government structures, sections of highways and interstates. You drive along, you see this section of memorial for somebody, and these are all great things. Medical facilities, countless other recognition endeavors. And men and women are forever memorialized in this physical world that we live in. And our society and environment just screams to elevate members of society above others in so many facets of our life. This need to exalt others can creep into the church, because we also, we live out in that world. And then in the church, we can let some of those things come in where we're trying to exalt or raise up brethren higher than each other, when we're all one in Christ Jesus. We're all functional body parts, and we're all the same as far as God is concerned. But occasionally I'll go out on the internet, and maybe you have two different congregations' websites, whether it be a sound congregation, denomination, whatever. and just look through websites. A lot of times I'm looking for songs. If I'm trying to find a song and I want to hear it, I'll try to find some place that has maybe a singing and they've got it on their website, and I can find recording of it and listen to it so I can understand better about hearing a song if it's something I want to lead. But quite often on the websites, I'll find something about their past history. Now, a lot of congregations, a lot of churches will have, the current leadership. Here's our preacher, a picture of them, and here's, our leadership, whether they have elders, whether they don't, whether they have deacons and, current ones. But they also have, a lot of them have some past history. It might be 150, 200 years old, and they have a picture of, maybe a building. They have, past historical notes related to the history of their group, who donated the land, who, they're exalting people from the past to say, this is kind of our background. This is where we came from. And that's what they're resting their laurels on. They seem to be like a self-exaltation kind of thing. It's like, this is who we are. This is where we came from. And for the here and now, really, what relevance is there to the past? Paul said in Philippians 3:13-14, to press forward, forgetting what is behind, look forward. Don't look back and lose sight of what work we have to do. And that same mindset, as I mentioned, can bleed over into our Christian lives, into our congregation. We need to fight against that. So we continue to be a functioning congregation as we should be doing, and looking at the things we should do instead of what are the things that happened in the past and who did those, and let's kind of lean on those kind of things. No, we need to look forward and go towards the things that we need to be doing as Christians. So there are scriptures that speak against elevating man. I listed a few examples here. One of them is Psalm 75, 6-7. I'm not going to read a lot of these, but I'll just read a few of these. Psalm 75, 6 and 7. For not from the east, nor from the west, nor from the desert comes exaltation, but God is the judge. He puts down one and exalts another. And then Psalm 118, verse 8, it is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. 1 Peter, verse 5 and 6, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. So God's the one that does the exalting, the lifting up, not man. Matthew 3 and verse 9, if you remember when John was preaching and called them a brood of vipers and said, God could raise up children to Abraham from stones. In other words, don't rely on your ancestries or the past of others to try to determine, what you are. You need to stand on your own 2 feet. So no matter what our role is in the body, we should do it with all our might and focus on how we can aid in the growth of both the local body and the kingdom. So the past is the past. We can't change that. And hopefully we've, fixed everything that, we've done wrong in the past, and we know that we need to focus on the future. So we don't have to have any special recognition. Now, everybody likes to get a thank you. I'm sure everybody likes to thank you. You did a good job. Those kind of things, a pat on the back. But recognition from man should not be why we serve. Luke 17:10, we have done all the things that we're commanded to do. We're still unprofitable servants. And we all know that. The only thing we've done is what's our duty to do as Christians, and that's what we should focus on. So I want to close to think about our memory verse, Joshua 1:9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So those are the things that we need to focus on, being strong and courageous and focusing on what we need to be doing individually as a part of the body. So if you need God to be with you, either in initial obedience tonight or in penitent confession, you can come forward now as we sing this invitation song.
Someday you'll
Someday your record you'll
I want to thank Tim for the invitation tonight. It's good to see a good number we have out tonight, given the nastiness of the weather outside. One thing about it, a night like this will make you realize how blessed we are to have not only a nice, warm, dry place to come to study, but we can return to our homes or wherever we're staying and have more of the same. That's truly a blessing, and hopefully we will always enjoy those blessings. It's good to see everybody out. Want to remember to mention the women's or the ladies' class tomorrow tomorrow evening at 7:00 for the women of the congregation. If you can participate in that, that would be a really good thing. Just kind of support one another. Remember the sick and any that may be traveling. I don't know anymore when I stand up here. My mind just seems to go blank when I think about people who are sick, but I can refer to them generically, and God knows who they are. So, and most of you do as well. So let's remember them. And before we're dismissed, is there anything else that needs to be said? I don't see any hands, so we'll be led in our closing prayer.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to come together to worship you, to learn about you. I pray that we put into practice what we learned tonight. Pray that we're never afraid to follow you, no matter how bad it gets. That we're always faithful to you, Lord. Continue to be with Dave Dickerson through his health issues. Be with Devin and Stacy's mom, and be with those that are traveling as well. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.